Welcome to U.S. Visa Questions Answered Here.
Hello and welcome to Talking U.S. Visas with immigration attorney Frances Hayden. For the past 35 years, Frances has focused on consular processing of non-immigrant visas at U.S. embassies and consulates worldwide, with a special emphasis on third country national visa processing. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is Behind the Embassy Doors, how third country consulates handle your visa application. Frances, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too. I'm glad I didn't scare you away after the first episode.
Not at all. I'm raring to go.
Can you explain what third country national processing is and how it fits into the broader landscape of consular immigration law?
Yes, happy to. It's called third country because it's when a person goes to a U.S. consulate or embassy outside the United States. They go to a country other than their country of citizenship or residency. So, for example, a person from India might go to a consulate in Barbados. That's the basic of it. It's funny because in Mexico, I don't know if they still do, but they used to call it other than Mexican, OTM. So the third country national, it's often referred to as TCNs. Immigration attorneys call them TCNs, third country nationals, or in Mexico, other than Mexican, OTM. And it's always been both a wonderful thing and sort of a murky thing because the rules are never perfectly clear. It's not written in any law book. It's not part of any regulation. But in speaking generally, it has always been available to visa applicants to apply anywhere they find themselves in the world. They could be there for any reason and go in and apply at a U.S. embassy or consulate for their visa. Now, there have in the past been restrictions, but those restrictions are placed by the individual consulate management because, understandably, they have been allowed to manage their own workload, particularly if they're in a country that has a very, very high volume of visa applicants. And so they were allowed to put some restrictions on it. But as I mentioned in the last episode, after COVID, when there were a lot of backlogs on visa appointments, the State Department made a proclamation to the consulates and embassies that, please take as many of these third country nationals as you possibly can, and don't consider it a negative factor that they are applying at your post rather than in their home country. And that's a very positive thing for many, many people. People are motivated to do third country processing for many different reasons. It can be for convenience. Say you're in the United States and you have a visa status, but you don't have the visa stamped in your passport. You don't necessarily want to fly all the way back to Australia because it's very, very far. Mm-hmm. And you might want to just pop over into Mexico and apply for your visa. That's one reason. But often it's because people have heard that the adjudications in their home country are too strict and that there's a culture of suspicion, or there's a particular kind of case that if you apply in that country, you're likely to go into a long administrative processing review, which is, again, a subject for another discussion because administrative processing is like the boogeyman. Because if you're told that your case is going into administrative processing, you have no idea. Sometimes it'll last a week. Sometimes it'll last 9 months or a year or longer. And so people are understandably terrified of administrative processing. So to avoid the administrative processing, they go to a third country where things are being processed a little more quickly and where the culture of the consulate or embassy is to not necessarily be as suspicious of the case and not as likely to put them in administrative processing. Of course, they also do it because they're afraid of being outright denied. And so, as you can imagine, there's a ton of rumors around this process because there's a bit of unwritten law in it, and there can be a bunch of confusion. And so people need more guidance than usual in this area.
Are there any specific challenges or obstacles that third country nationals might face during the application process?
There are. The first one is that applicant allowed to enter the country where they want to go to process their visa? You have to check many people don't even think about that, but you have to check the requirements of the country that you want to go apply for your visa in to see whether or not you can enter visa-free, depending on your nationality, whether you need to apply for a visa for that specific country, how long does that take? And also, it's very common these days that many countries have decided to sort of outsource their visa processing to the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, the Schengen area in Europe. And if you have a visa, no matter your nationality, if you have a visa from one of those countries, then you can use that to enter the third country. Because I think they feel safe doing that because they don't have such a robust process of adjudicating visitor visas to their country. And rather than put that all in place or try to keep up with the demand, they figure, well, those countries I just mentioned, for example, have very high security standards and have very robust processes to screen people of whether or not they can get the visa for those countries. And they feel very secure in letting these people in for a short period of time to visit. So that's challenge number one. The other challenge is many people feel, I'm going to go there and they're just going to look at me. And this has happened. It's not happening much lately, but they're going to look at me and say, no, I'm not going to even talk to you. Go back to your home country. What are you doing here? And that's everybody's biggest fear.
Why do they have that fear?
Because it has happened and it can happen. So that has remained in the collective consciousness ever since it has used to be happening more.
Okay.
But now, because everything is on the internet and consulates and embassies have very good websites, normally they do publish something about what their policy is towards third country nationals. And normally what you'll see is something that says like, while we know that you may want to apply here, we would encourage you to apply in your home country because, and what they say is because they are better able to assess your ties to that country, or sometimes better able to assess your qualifications for a visa if that's where you got your education. But in many cases, ties to your home country are irrelevant to your visa application because you don't have to have them. So that really speaks to people who are coming to the United States just as visitors. And it's very unusual for somebody to third country process who is just applying for a visitor visa to the United States. And that discouraging commentary that's on the website is correct in that case, because the main part of a visitor visa application is, am I going to come back? Do I have strong enough ties in my community? Do I have a job to come back to? Do I have a school to come back to? Do I have a family to come back to? And theoretically, that's best understood by a consular officer in the country where you live. But many, many visas and many third country processing type of visas, the majority of them are working visas where you already have some sort of petition approved from immigration in the United States before you go. So you've been halfway vetted and you don't have to prove that you're going to go home because it's allowed for you to have the intention to stay in the United States. So there's a lot of factors that go into evaluating whether or not someone is likely to be successful at a third country post. And that's part of my job. So I try to, talk over everything with the person, find out their entire history, their situation, whether they have had any previous immigration problems, whether or not they have ever been arrested. We could have a whole other session on what happens if you've been arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol, for example. And so my job is to look at all of that and give people my best advice about where they can apply, where perhaps they're interested in, will it be faster? That's another motivation for third country processing, because there can be a huge backlog in your home country. And there are other places where you can get an appointment in a couple of days.
How can third country national processing impact that timeline? Is it, I know you said sometimes it can be faster, but is there also should applicants be prepared for potential delays as well?
Always. In any consular processing scenario, you have to be prepared for delays. In fact, I have a whole sheet on possible delays that I show people before they go. But the way that timing is most impacted with third country processing is many countries, although they will accept many U.S. consulates at many countries, although they will accept a third country national applicant, they will put them in, they have a way of doing it technologically, where they schedule the people who are residents and citizens first, and they give the third country applicants the leftovers. So they might be waiting longer to get an appointment than somebody who is a resident or a citizen there. And there are screening questions that you are asked when you're in the process of setting up your appointment profile, and you must answer them correctly. Or like if you say, I am a citizen of Portugal, and then you show up at your interview in Portugal, but you're really from Tajikistan, you might be turned away because you were put in the wrong classification for getting an appointment. So there can be delays in that way. And that's one of the other disclaimers that on the websites of the consulates and embassies, they say you may be delayed further. I don't think you're more likely to be delayed after the interview at a third country interview than you are in your home country in reality. But delays are possible anywhere. Right. And so if you're delayed in a third country, it's much less convenient because you're paying for a hotel. You don't have friends and family. Sometimes people have to go ahead and jump on an airplane and fly home or fly to another country because they aren't able to enter the United States until the delay is resolved. So there's a convenience factor. And some places that you go to apply, like say you apply in the Bahamas and you need to fly back to India to wait out the administrative processing or the delay, and you don't have any idea how long it's going to take. And if you don't have visas to transit through the countries where you need to go to get home, it becomes a big travel agency puzzle to get from there to your home country. So delays are sort of more serious when you're in third countries. And people are worried about that because of the expense and inconvenience of it.
Yeah, and just being somewhere that you're not familiar with, that doesn't feel like home, can kind of mess with you mentally and emotionally too.
Very much so. And you may not speak the language and,
right.
Definitely that's a factor. So, people are very concerned about it, but at the same time, their motivations, whatever they are, sometimes drive them to still do it and take that risk.
And so what is your role in the process of helping, when you have a client doing a third country application, like how do you help them?
Well, the first step is the consultation. And as I said before, I find out all about them. I ask a lot of questions. I'm very nosy. I like to know everything, even things that may seem irrelevant, I ask about. And then I gave them my opinion about what their options are and where they can go. Sometimes we just leave it at that. But if they want to hire me to support them through the course of applying for the visa, then they retain me. And I assist them through the process of establishing an appointment profile in that country. I assist them in filling out the electronic visa application form. I assist them in paying the visa fee. Sometimes you have to pay it on the ground at a bank in the country, and so I have to find a way to do that. Once it's scheduled, then we do, I send them a document list of what I think they should bring with them in their particular case. And then we do at least one pretty extensive preparation call where we go over exactly how they should prepare for the interview, how they should manage the documents that they bring to the interview in terms of what to show when, what not to show ever, what the potential questions are. We definitely go into that. And depending on the visa type, depending on the person, their history, the questions can be different. And really, a consular officer can ask you anything. One of the questions they tend to ask at a third country interview is, why'd you come here? Mm-hmm. What are you doing here? Mm-hmm. And somebody has to be careful with how they answer that, because if they say something that is totally not credible, they lose their credibility. Like, I was coming to the beach and I thought, while I was here, I might as well get my knee done.
I figured while I was here, I'd, get a tattoo and then, come over here to the consulate.
That's it. And consular officers are smart. And not only are they trained, they're generally highly educated. And they also have a lot of experience talking to people, and they've heard it all.
Right.
So I try to give them the best answer that is still true. I mean, sometimes it's just as simple as, I got an appointment here and I needed my visa and I couldn't get it elsewhere. And that can be legitimate, depending on if it is hard to get an appointment where you would normally go, which they can look up. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. But as far as my process, I do that. It depends. I have various levels of assistance that I give depending on how much support the person wants. But the second highest level of support is I give them access to me via WhatsApp. so that literally in real time, if I'm not with them in the foreign country, they can reach me if there's an emergency or if there's last minute jitters. I'm there for them to report to me after what happened to the interview and at the interview and interpret that for them, which can be very, very useful. Like they may have been told something that means it'll be ready, the visa will be ready in a couple of days, or they may have been told something that is more serious and they don't know how to interpret that on their own. In some cases, this is less and less over time. I do go to, now, even though I can't get inside the consulates and embassies anymore to represent people directly in person, I actually go to the city where they're having the interview. And I support them on the ground in terms of logistics, in terms of language, if it's a Spanish-speaking country, in terms of even transporting them to the appointment, holding their hand right up to the moment where I have to say, good luck, waiting for them when they come out. And that's like the highest level of service. I used to do that a lot, because I could schedule 10 people at the same place the same day. And so the cost for them could be as a group, even if they don't know each other, but my expenses and my time cost less if it's spread over, 10 different applicants. But now more and more, it's impossible to schedule people at the same time because scheduling is a huge challenge. So I'm very involved in the scheduling and glitches in the various systems because different regions and different countries use different contractors for the scheduling system. And there can be brick walls in scheduling the appointment that are tremendous and tremendously frustrating and tremendously difficult to overcome. I often, for my clients, if I'm giving them a full service support, I will be calling customer service about the glitches in the system. I have to transfer an appointment profile from one country to another, all that. And so some of it, maybe you wouldn't say, well, that doesn't sound so much like legal advice, but it encompasses both the legal advice and a lot of practical logistical advice.
Yeah, and a lot of support. And it sounds like that's something that people in these situations obviously need a lot of. Well, thank you for tuning in to Talking U.S. Visas with immigration attorney Frances Hayden. To connect with Frances and her team, visit haydenlaw.com, and please like and subscribe to our channel and leave us a review if you get a second. Frances, it's always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for the insight.
Same here. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.